What is Candela Obscura? 3 key facts. First, it's a new role-playing game from Darrington Press, the tabletop game imprint for Critical Role productions. Second, it's the setting and system for Critical Role's new actual play show, with the inestimable Matt Mercer as game master and an all-star cast. Third, they've just published a quick start guide designed to introduce us to the world, the rules, and an adventure that we can play as a sample of what's to come. And I should note that this review is based strictly on the quick start guide, not the actual play. That's because as I'm filming this, the first episode of the actual play hasn't actually aired yet. I'm good, but I'm not magical. And speaking of magic, magic lies at the heart of Candela Obscura. So how does magic work in this game? 3 key facts. First, the setting of Candela Obscura is what we used to call high fantasy, but now people think that's something completely different, so instead, we call it second world fantasy. This second world fantasy is set in a steampunkish city with technology and culture roughly comparable to something between late Victorian and Edwardian times. Second, even though magic exists in the world of Candela Obscura, the common people in the setting don't believe in it. It's kind of like urban fantasy settings where nobody believes werewolves or vampires exist, even though they're all busy hitting on high school chicks. The primary reason for this division in knowledge is the flare, a barrier which exists between this world and a supernatural realm beyond. Third, there is the bleed. Created by powerful magic, bleed thins and corrupts reality, allowing incursions from the supernatural realm. Now, there's a Lovecraftian element here, but with an interesting inversion. In Lovecraft, the powers beyond are indifferent to human reality. But this is a more classical theme of damnation. The supernatural seeks to tempt humanity with great gifts so that they will thin reality and allow the supernatural to cross over. It's unclear how much of this setting will be detailed in the full rulebook when it's released, but at least for the purposes of the Quick Start Guide, the primary focus of the setting are the Fairelands. 3 key facts about the Fairelands and the new Faerans who live there. First, 9 years ago, the Fairelands were invaded by the Otherwhere, a country which lies on the far side of the Glass Sea. This was the last Great War, and it ended 3 years ago when the Fairelands used newfangled electric technology to drive out the invaders. The scars and legacy of that war still lie heavy on the land. Second, the great city of New Fair lies on the western coast of the Fairelands. It's a little unclear from the quick start whether or not this is the country's capital, but that's probably the case. We are told to picture Edinburgh, Lima, New York, Paris, Istanbul, and other such places where modern development consumes arcane history. Third, beneath New Fair lie the ruins of Old Fair, the capital of a civilization that once thrived here 2,000 years ago, but which was destroyed when its tamperings with magic led to a catastrophic breakdown of the flare. Recently rediscovered by modern civilization, scholars are only beginning to reveal its dangerous secrets, something which is deeply feared by the Candela Obscura. Which, of course, brings us to the title. What is the Candela Obscura? 3 key facts. First, it is the secret society that the PCs are members of, dedicated to investigating supernatural phenomena in order to protect the world from the realm beyond. Second, the Candela Obscura is organized into chapters, a cell-like structure of local enclaves, each led by a lightkeeper who, in the context of the game, is an NPC who acts as a patron and guide for the players. Each chapter is made up of multiple circles, and the PCs form one such circle. Third, all of the chapters of the Candela Obscura are connected to a trans-dimensional vault known as the Fourth Pharos, which is somehow built within the flare itself, and can offer resources and lore to the circle. So the campaign structure of Candela Obscura is simple. The Lightkeeper provides assignments, which are adventures, and the PCs complete their assignments. To do this, of course, we'll need rules, and these rules have been designed by Spencer Stark and Rowan Hall. Let's break it down. You have 9 action ratings divided into 3 drives. The Nerve drive covers move, strike, and control. Cunning covers sway, read, and hide. Intuition covers survey, focus, and sense. When you need to make an action check, you roll the number of 6-sided dice equal to the relevant action rating, and you look at the highest die value you roll. If it's a 6, you succeed. If it's a 4 or 5, it's a mixed success, which gets you what you want, but only at a cost. And if you roll a 1 to 3, you fail and suffer a consequence. Also, if you roll multiple 6s, that's a critical success, and if you don't have a rating in the relevant action, you can still make the check by rolling 2 dice and taking the lower result. Each drive also has a rating, and you can spend drive points to add an extra die to a matching action check. If you spend all of your drive points, of course, you can't spend any more until they're recharged, which you can do by taking a gilded action. Under each drive, one action is the gilded action. If you roll a gilded action, you replace one of your dice with a die of a different color, the gilded die. If you use the result rolled on the gilded die, and you can choose to do so even if it's a lower value than another die you rolled, then you also regenerate 1 point of the corresponding drive. On top of all that, you also have resistances, which also correspond to drives. If you don't like the result of a particular action check, you can spend a resistance to re-roll a number of dice equal to the action rating you used to make the check. The Quick Start Guide does not appear to explain how resistances are restored, but I'd guess that you get them all back at the end of an assignment, or something like that. Now, I mentioned consequences for failed or mixed success checks. Before you roll the dice, the GM will set the stakes of the roll, either low stakes, normal stakes, or high stakes, and that will determine how severe the consequences can be on a failure, or a mixed success. One consequence you might suffer is damage, which can be either body for physical harm, brain for mental harm, or bleed for magical harm. You can take 3 damage in each category, but if you need to mark a 4th damage in the same category, you instead erase all the marks and suffer a scar. Scars are permanent changes to your characters. They might gain a limp, become consumed by guilt, or grow vampiric teeth. Mechanically, you remove a point from an action of your choice and add a point to a different action, reflecting how your character is altered by their scar. In addition to all this, the circle itself has a sheet, complete with mechanics and abilities that the PCs can collectively develop over time as a result of the actions they take and the assignments they complete. This material is only lightly explored in the Quick Start Guide, but essentially the circle can gain illumination as a form of experience point. Once you complete a circle of advancement on the illumination track, both the individual characters and the circle as a whole will gain new abilities. Now, online, this system has drawn a lot of comparisons to Blades in the Dark, a wonderful role-playing game designed by John Harper. If you're familiar with Blades in the Dark, this is probably unsurprising. In that game, the PCs are part of a criminal crew, with crew sheets that similarly allow the PCs to advance their crew over time, and the action resolution mechanics are quite similar too. The canny-eyed among you will also note similarities to Niels Hintz's Vaesen, Clinton R. Nixon's The Shadow of Yesterday, and D. Vincent and Meg Baker's Apocalypse World, among others. Now, the primary complaint is that the Candela Obscura Quickstart feels like a knockoff or watered-down version of these other games. In fact, if you're not already familiar with games like Blades in the Dark, you'll probably feel a little lost at times. Now, for example, the Quickstart notably glosses over how and why and when the GM should actually adjudicate damage. But I think this kind of misses one of the 2 big elephants in the room here. This is a quick start. Only 9 pages in this pamphlet are dedicated to explaining the rules. Sure, I can look at the single paragraph explaining high, low, and normal stakes and get a little nervous because it looks almost exactly like how new Blades in the Dark GMs routinely screw up the sophisticated system of effect and positioning in that game by attempting to resolve them as if they were D&D difficulty classes. But the reason effect and position are so brilliantly executed in Blades in the Dark is because of how Harper integrates them effortlessly into a score of advanced subsystems. Engagement rolls, crew development, progress clocks, heat, incarceration, downtime activities. Literally every corner of the rulebook reflects and develops these core mechanics. You won't find anything like that in the Candela Obscura Quickstart because, again, it's only 9 pages long. If I gave you a 9-page version of Blades in the Dark or Vaesen or Apocalypse World, it would also look like a watered-down version of those games. Now, if in the final game, high, low, and normal stakes, for example, we mean a vague and untethered mechanic, or if the Byzantine dice fiddling doesn't get hooked into more rewarding systems, then that would be deeply disappointing. But at the moment, I don't see any reason to assume that this will be the case. The function of a quick start guide is to give you a little taste of the game, to give you enough information about the game that you can run a session for your players and decide together whether you're interested enough to explore all the possibilities and options that the full game will offer. So, has the Candela Obscura Quickstart Guide done that for me? And will it do it for you? Well, before I can answer that question, I think we first have to look at the second elephant in the room. On page 9 of the Quick Start, while discussing scars and how they should be used in the game, the authors write, In our experience, role-playing insanity is neither ethical nor mechanically viable. Okay, so first off, shots fired. Call of Cthulhu, Unknown Armies, Vampire the Masquerade, your games are all unethical and mechanically not viable. I guess somebody should send a memo to the millions of people who have been playing these mechanically not viable games for the past 40 years. Second, and more importantly, this type of moralizing is found prominently throughout the text of the Quickstart. And the problem is that they really want to have their cake and eat it, too. You don't want to mechanically model disabilities in your role-playing game because you believe mechanically modeling disability is inherently ableist, and you want to create a game that can appeal to a diverse audience, including those members of the disabled community who will be made uncomfortable or be excluded by that ableism? 100%. I don't completely agree with your premises, but I completely support your right to make that game. And if there is an audience that wants and needs a game like that to exist in order to feel included and to participate in the role-playing hobby, I believe that game should absolutely exist. But here's the thing. First, I noticed that your list of body scars includes limps, missing arms, deafness. If it's unethical and mechanically not viable to model mental disabilities because of ableism, why is it okay to mechanically model these physical disabilities? I also noticed that your other examples of scars include a person traumatized by the violence they've experienced, another who alternates between sadness and manic outbursts, and a third that sees and hears hallucinations that others do not. You didn't use the words PTSD, manic depression, or schizophrenia, but I'm not sure that it's ethical as long as you pretend that you're not doing it is really the coherent moral position that you think it is. Now this is not the only example of this kind of thing in the book. And the ultimate problem here is that the game is afraid of its own shadow. One half of Candela Obscura wants to be a horror game full of terrifyingly high stakes and big, meaningful, irreversible consequences. And the other half of Candela Obscura is convinced that having terrifyingly high stakes and big, meaningful consequences is neither ethically nor mechanically viable. This fundamental tension at the heart of the game desperately needs to be resolved in the full final rulebook. And if it can't be, or it won't be, then Candela Obscura will rip itself apart, incapable of communicating a clear and coherent creative vision to either its game masters or its players. So, now that we've looked at both elephants in the room, has the Candela Obscura Quickstart Guide convinced me to run the game for my players? No. But to be fair, that is a very high hurdle to clear at the moment. I'm running a number of different campaigns and have a very long list of games that I wish I had time to play right now. It also has a lot to do with the sample scenario included in the Quickstart, which I recognize we didn't even have time to talk about today. So the second question is, has the Candela Obscura Quickstart Guide convinced me to check out the full rulebook when it's released? Absolutely. I think there are some very intriguing elements to the setting, which includes the potential for rich, interesting, and varied fonts of adventure, along with some potentially very powerful avenues for a campaign to develop along. I really like the inversion of the Lovecraftian themes, and there are similar inversions in the mechanical design of the game which meaningfully distinguish it from Blades in the Dark or Call of Cthulhu in ways that are thematically evocative. I have great hopes that we'll see these ideas further developed in rich, complex, and deep ways in the full rulebook, in which case I will definitely be interested in exploring the Fairelands at my table. Finally, is the Candela Obscura Quickstart Guide a book that you should take the time to check out now? In my opinion, 100%. First, it's free. Second, it's short. And third, and most importantly, it's interesting. There are a lot of interesting ideas here that I've really enjoyed thinking about. I'm really glad I took the time to read it, and I think you will be too. There's a link to download the Quickstart Guide in the Font of All Knowledge down below. If you'd like to see more of my reviews, GMing advice, or learn more about my upcoming book So You Want to Be a Game Master, you should make a high-stakes strike check to hit the subscribe button, too. Don't miss. It'll scar you for life.